Eliminate the workplace excuse. That's what leaders do. This is the Career Blind Spot Podcast. What's a workplace conversation you're avoiding? What's a workplace conversation you're afraid of, you're hiding from? You talk to everyone else except for the person that matters most. So that's our CBQ of today, because, doing the fun stuff at work or solving problems you like, or even gossiping with the people you trust and who got your back, I want to say it's always easy, but it's a lot different than actually having that tough conversation, that necessary conversation, that inevitable conversation. So in today's mini episode, we're going to talk about the 3 ways we avoid emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, EQ. So workplace, there's always 3 conflicts going on. There's you and your peer have beef, or you and your client, or you and your boss, 2 human beings, 2 opposing egos, or at least 2 people who just aren't on the same page. Then you also have an issue with your job, the demands. Now, sometimes that is a customer, but is your issue with the customer, or are you just failing to understand your resource, or overwhelmed, etc.? There's a role that's being played. It's not personal, it's business. And then you versus you. You don't know what you want. That's why you took this management job, or that's why you're in sales, or that's why you left sales, or you've changed your mind, which is totally allowable. But 3 places for workplace conflict. We've talked about them before in the past. Go back and listen to any other episode. You'll hear patterns. But me versus you, the most common. Me versus job, the most common real reason for the surface level of 2 people not getting along. And then there's me versus me. Got a problem with myself, looking in the mirror. So how do we apply EQ to that? Well, when it comes to me versus you, think of it as taking temperature. Or I should say the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer. Both tell you the temperature of the room. One, however, assuming your air conditioning works, cross your fingers, Phoenix, you can adjust the temperature. You can make it cooler or warmer. And so EQ, when you're avoiding that conversation, is, well, how do you feel? What's your self-awareness? Are you regulating? Are you adjusting? Are you coming into this with a clear head? And so a lot of times the reason we avoid or we go in all in the wrong way is because we're not taking our appropriate temperature. Now, not to go too much into that analogy, it's one thing to adjust your thermostat. Well, what happens if it's really 110 degrees outside and yet your house says it's 60 degrees? Just because the number reads one thing, or the house is saying, I'm fine. Meanwhile, the paint is melting off the wall. EQ is about taking your temperature, but also taking the temperature of someone else. And so a lot of times we avoid those conversations because we're so wound up. We're afraid of what's going to happen. And it actually has a lot less to do with how the other person feels. Now, not to say that they don't, that they're not being as tactful or kind or compassionate as they could be. But sometimes that direct report that you have, or the employees, they're all bent out of shape because life happens. But how do you feel about it? That's good EQ. And when you know what, got to bite the bullet, got to, pee into the wind, or whatever the phrase is. I got to do the thing that's going to be uncomfortable. That's good EQ, choosing to do that as opposed to being forced into it. Think about how many things feel like burdens or obligations when you have to do it. Inevitably, we've terminated this person, or I have to put my 2 weeks in a less than exciting way, versus when you choose to say, hey guys, I think I'm going to leave, or hey, unfortunately this isn't working out, as opposed to waiting, dragging it out. EQ between you and the job. Now, a good employee, I think, does this inevitably. Or actually, let me change that a little bit. A sustainably good employee has good EQ, because anyone can be good for a day, even a week, quarter, a couple years, but to continue to get back on the horse, to rebound after a pandemic or after some layoffs or after an influx of new hires. And embrace your job that is inevitably changing. Even if you came in as a service person or as a salesperson, chances are technology has changed your job. Good EQ is realizing, oh, I don't like this new CRM. I don't want to use something new. My Rolodex, look it up, kids, is still just as effective as Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever it is. Good EQ is, but there's a reason we use it. And even if I disagree, my boss wants it or HR wants it or whoever it is. So I got to embrace that in a way that doesn't interfere, but ideally complements my role. But you got to stop and choose that. Which lastly brings us to EQ with yourself. Me conflict. Looking in the mirror. Now, a lot of times you'll disagree, or I'm sorry, you don't want to disagree with yourself. Your feelings are your feelings. And other people are wrong, and you're the smartest human being alive, and we're all stupid. But think about that as a leader. How often do you think your team, especially those of them who are stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed, etc., have had a good EQ conversation with themselves? And they've been objective of what's going on, how they feel about it, what they can control, what they can't, what they should let go of, and so on and so on. So what's a workplace conversation you're avoiding? Either is avoiding with another person, your direct report, your high performers who want a raise or want new responsibilities or were promised that promotion a while ago, or your clients who you're going to raise their fees, or you got to drop a service offering, or you're no longer going to honor that grandfathering clause, and now they got to jump to a new product. Or your boss that, well, flip all the stuff I just said. You want the raise, you want the promotion, you don't want that product. Are you avoiding it with another living, breathing human being? And chances are you are, because you're not tapping into how you really feel about it and what you can do about it. And then with your job, that's not with anyone else. You might have an issue with your job, and yes, that has a lot to do with your boss. But your job is maybe not looking at the mirror, but it's looking at the job description or whatever responsibility hierarchy you have. Now let's go off of business for a second. Let's go personal. Your job as a parent, as a partner, as a roommate, as a student, as a little league coach, as a whatever it is, work is either fun or it's a grind, or there's a spectrum in there. And so it's probably a grind when you're not paying attention to it and you're just doing it blindly. But ironically, maybe even come full circle, when you're in flow and you're just loving the work, you're not kind of paying attention, but you're enjoying it. And so are you actually taking that crucial conversation? Are you avoiding it? Which is all about, again, how do I feel about it? And then lastly, you versus you. Unlike your job, it's looking back at yourself, it's looking in the mirror. Why did I choose this? Why did I eat that slice of bread? Sorry, that's me. That's personal. But, it's acknowledging that, hey, I have feelings and I was hangry, or I was exhausted and carbs sound good, or I was exhausted and that's why I was short with the customer, or I'm overwhelmed and that's why I was short with a peer, whatever it is. And really, if you haven't caught on by now, all of this stuff, it's kind of right in your face. But good EQ, embracing conversations that you're avoiding, it starts with you. It starts with you tapping into how you're feeling, not eliminating it. There's a lot of us who are anxious, depressed. I think that's all depression is we're just overly anxious. I'm not a psychiatrist, you know that. Don't take that at 100% face value. But all of this comes back to you, the individual, taking inventory of how they feel in their surroundings. And we can go on, but I'll tell you this. Just like certain things are learned behavior, we don't instinctively have them when we're born into this world. Being racist, being an engineer, learning how to play PS5. You have to learn how to be a good leader or have good EQ. So figure it out. Good luck. Do you have an underrepresented leadership perspective? Know someone who does? I want to help you share it. Contact me, juan@careerblindspot.com. All guests get a free hiring assessment and a second opinion from yours truly. No talent, no culture, no excuses.